Hi, this is Caleb Cain, and you're watching Cain Course World History. I want you to think of the biggest city you've been to. Maybe it's only as big as Milwaukee, like you can see in the screen here. Maybe it's something bigger like New York or Chicago or Los Angeles. But what is it that makes a city a city? I think obviously we think first, tall buildings, skyscrapers, lots of traffic, lots of people, right? All of those are things that make cities cities. And that's really our topic for today as we talk about urbanization, more specifically the Industrial Revolution. One of the major things we see coming out of this time period in world history is the growth of cities, something that you and I are all very used to. But historically speaking, that's a relatively new thing. Take, for example, England, which will be our focus today, Great Britain and England, specifically London. This is London just before the Industrial Revolution. Yes, you see the buildings, you see the ships, obviously a lot of activity, but not to the level that we're probably used to. In this unit and in this lesson, we're going to see London go from this to this. Pretty dramatically different. I think the big thing that probably stands out is the smoke and the change in the color alone. There's lots of reasons why cities are going to grow to this point, but all of it is because of something that we call the Industrial Revolution. We're going to get into that today, talk about the causes and the effects of that and why this is such an important time of change in European history and world history overall. However, in order to understand the context of the Industrial Revolution, it's probably important for us to kind of review where we're at in England, historically speaking. To do that, we're going to go way back to the era of feudalism. You might remember this tapestry. We've taken a look at bits and pieces of it before throughout our world history class, but it really does a nice job of representing what life was like in medieval England. This is what we once talked about as feudalism. You can see the lord right here and the vassal right here. Everything he's produced is right here, and a good chunk of that he has to give back to the king or to the lord. And all of this is really what we've discussed in the past as a giant pyramid scheme, right? The king up top, you've got your vassals and lords, you've got your knights, and then you've got your peasants in the bottom. And most of those peasants, as you probably remember, were farmers. And that's how life was in rural England and actually most of England. If you were a peasant, which most of you would have been, you would have been busy farming, and you luckily get to keep enough of that to help your family survive, but it really wasn't a profitable enterprise. You weren't going to be a farmer and make millions of dollars. However, as we get close to the modern era and we start to see industrialism take off, part of that has to do specifically with some of the changes that we have going on in farming. Okay, farming used to be something that your family would do. And here in this picture, you can see colonial England in the New World. It was a family affair. And eventually, as we need more food for more people, we start to see the use of slavery. But as we've discussed throughout world history, people are lazy and they're also jerks. And with that, they want to find ways where they don't have to work as hard. And so we've always seen inventions that make life and farming easier. One example of that is the seed drill. Jethro Tull invented this, and it's a game changer in world history because it allows farmers to very quickly plant massive amounts of crops, which means in the long run they can harvest more, and therefore they can not only provide for their families, but they can actually provide for bigger cities and bigger areas, and therefore make money, which is a newfound idea, right? We've talked about the growth of capitalism, the idea that your money is what you make and you can invest that and buy and sell things in whatever way you desire. So the seed drill has changed the way we look at farming, and it's made food more accessible. Another major change is the introduction of crop rotation. This is something that all farms really do today. But having different crops planted in different fields and rotating that year to year allows the ground to stay more fertile. It doesn't get over cultivated. And it again allows you to produce more. So why is this important? Well, it's pretty simple. Food is way more available than it's ever been before. No longer do people just have to provide food on their own. They can actually go and buy it from somewhere, which means we don't need as many farmers. However, those people are still going to want to work. And as we have more food available, that means the population is going to increase. One of the things we see throughout history is when you have more food, you have more babies. That's the way things go because it's more affordable. But because farming isn't the end all be all anymore, people are going to be looking for new jobs. And that's really where our story with the Industrial Revolution begins. Now, remember, England is simply just an island. And for most of world history, it's only been that. However, in the last few units, we covered how England began to grow into an empire with the pursuits of colonization and trying to expand outside European borders. And there were a lot of reasons for that. England is now truly an empire. And it's for that reason that food is also more available. By engaging in the Columbian Exchange with North and South America, England has access to new vegetables like corn and potatoes, which have really stabilized diets and made things more nutritious. On top of that, England now has access to other materials it never had before. And one of those examples is cotton. Cotton is a wonderful resource, not only found in the Americas, but also found in India, one of England's major colonies. More on that in future lessons as well. But cotton is in high demand because it's soft and it's also can be fairly warm. And that's where the Industrial Revolution truly begins. Because people aren't farming as much in England anymore, their worldviews have now focused to other means of employment. And one of those means of employment is the cottage industry. The cottage industry was where our first types of manufactured goods were finished. You can see in this picture here a very basic setup. Basically, what would happen is they would take cotton, they would spin it into thread, and then they would weave it into whatever type of garment or blanket or fabric, we call those textiles, that could be sold on a bigger market. And so it was very common for homes or cottages to start mass producing these different types of textiles. And very quickly they started to make money off of these, which is where the industrial side of things takes over, because it was really hard for, in this example, for three people to keep up with the demand. And that's so much of what economics is about, is supply and demand. And because people had food, the demand for manufactured goods was much higher. This all starts to change with the spinning jenny, invented in the 1760s by a guy named James Hargreaves in Britain. This allowed spinners to spin more than one thread of cotton at once, and in doing so, create garments faster. This opened the door to a plethora of new opportunities for different business people and industry individuals who wanted to mass produce textile goods. And shortly after that, the water frame comes out in 1769, which meant the weaving didn't have to be done by hand anymore. It was powered by water. In essence, what you now have is our very first factories, places that could totally 100% produce a manufactured good pretty much on their own. And the jobs that went into those were fairly easy to run. I mean, if you look at this picture, there's kids working on this, and we'll talk more about child labor as we get further into the Industrial Revolution. But these were simple jobs. Rather than having somebody weave a scarf or a shirt completely on their own, the machine does most of that work, allowing you to produce more in a faster amount of time and therefore make more money. And that's really what the Industrial Revolution is all about. On top of that, these new machines in these factories that were mass producing were made in a very specific manner using interchangeable parts. Interchangeable parts means if one part breaks, all you got to do is take it out and put another one in there. It's almost like a Lego set or a toy or something you would build growing up. It was made to be in a sense that if one thing breaks, you can very easily fix it. It's kind of like how your cars work, right? If something breaks down in a car, you take it to a mechanic and they have a part to plug right in there and fix the car and make it go again. Same thing is true for factories and for the machines in those factories. This allowed work to continue at a high rate, and if something stopped, you could fix it quickly to get back into business and producing those goods. This all comes together with the assembly line. This is where the United States starts to get involved. Henry Ford, yes, Ford Motors created the assembly line, meaning you take whatever you're trying to produce and you work it down the line, and at each spot in the line, one person has a job to put that thing more and more together. And in doing so, this creates division of labor, that there are different jobs within each factory and within each product that's being produced. By only working on one thing, you only have to train one person to do one thing. In all, this creates a much faster process, therefore creating goods and services being mass produced at a scale we've never thought of before. With all of these changes by the mid-1800s, factories like this are now in full blossom, right? The ability to mass produce different goods is unprecedented at this point. And it's not just clothes. We're also talking weapons. We're talking tools. We're talking food. Things are being mass produced on a big scale and therefore creating a cash flow that we've never seen before. But most of this is really due to one invention. And that was a little bit earlier, 1775, James Watt perfected the steam engine. Now, this was a revolutionary idea because it allowed the factory system to really truly spread, because before, those first factories, like we talked about with the water frame, had to be on water. The steam engine, which takes steam and heated water, then funnels through these machines and makes the pistons and all that work, allows for a flexibility in factories that we hadn't had yet. Now they can be built anywhere. So by the mid-1800s, cities like London look like this. They're covered in factories because we have different things we need to produce, and this is where the money is. It's not in farming anymore. And that's why cities grow. Cities are growing to produce more, but they're also growing because people are moving there for jobs. This is life. This is livelihood. This was the way to survive and hopefully to create a better life for yourself, right? There's more cash available than we've had before. So hopefully many peasants who would have been peasants in the traditional sense now have a chance to move up in society because of the opportunities they have when it comes to making money. Now, with these factories and with the steam engine, there's still a desire to make it faster, to make things easier. And that's where we take the steam engine and we put it on rails. It's this mind-blowing experience that now makes our transportation faster. Steam engines made factory work faster, and now they make transport faster, which allows us not only to move people, but to now move the goods that we're mass producing and sell them faster. It's a game changer. And not only does it allow the transport, it also creates more jobs because you need people to lay the track. You need people to create the iron that makes the rails. You also need individuals to produce the fuel for steam engines, which isn't just steam. It also happens to be coal. Coal burns hotter. It burns faster than wood or any type of lumber. And it allows, therefore, to very quickly transport goods even more so. So therefore, coal mining becomes a major business in England. And now at this point, factories have not just created factory jobs, they've created jobs that make the factories possible. So our whole way of life has completely changed in a way that nobody would have guessed, simply because, again, food is more accessible than it ever was before. And now with these new worldviews about Enlightenment ideas and my rights and my money, it goes hand in hand with these changes that we start to see with industrialism. With the what of the Industrial Revolution already being established, it's also important for us to talk about the why. Why did this start in Great Britain and not somewhere else? Well, there's a few reasons as to why. The first is that these changes in agricultural practices that we talked about already, the seed drill and crop rotation, better diets and all of that happens because England is an empire. And most of these things happen in England. So England itself is having so much success agriculturally that it doesn't need the farmers that it used to. On top of that, England has a very rapid population growth due to this increased food supply, unlike any other place in the world. So they also now have the labor available to make industrialism happen. England also has a steady supply of capital or money. They can invest in these types of things. And there's lots of reasons to that. But the big reason is that England has gotten stinking rich off of its colonies. And this will allow the rich individuals, who we're going to call entrepreneurs for most of this unit, the opportunity to build factories and continue to get rich. And as we've talked all throughout world history, there is a greed that motivates humanity. Right? We always want more. We want more money. And the thought of investment and opportunities are going to be too great for people to overcome at this point. Britain also has the resources necessary to make this happen. They have coal. They have iron. Okay? We already mentioned the food. Because of all of this, England is going to be very successful in factories. Not to mention they also have cotton from its colonies, which is going to be the first thing that fuels that early textile industry. Again, the first types of factories were all textile related. And finally, the fact that the British Empire is so large, not only does it give Great Britain at home the materials necessary to produce these factories and these finished goods, it also gives them a network to trade with. And by the time the railroad comes along, this will now be a connected empire that allows goods to go from A to B and allow the rulers of these railroads and of these factories to really make it rich. Now, overall, with the Industrial Revolution in mind, I'd like you to think a little bit about, well, is this worth it? Because there's definitely a cost here. Unlike any other time in human history, we have really gone all in on the aspect of human greed. We've tried to make things so easy and so simple that now machinery in a lot of ways is becoming the worldview. It's becoming the way we define ourselves. And I feel like everybody knows what that's like today with the reliance we have on technology. And technology is great, but at what cost? What does it change about humanity? What does it change about us? And is that a direction historically that we want to go? All that and more will continue when we get into the ins and outs of the Industrial Revolution, what it was actually like to live during the revolution next time. Thanks for watching. Have a day.